Mr. Speaker.
Order. I'm calling Denise Roach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to take the first call for the Greens on the Parental Leave and Employment Protection 6 months paid leave and work contact hours amendment bill. So firstly, I want to just acknowledge the previous speaker and his remarkable contribution of mansplaining. I found it quite interesting. But more seriously, sir, I want to congratulate our colleague across the House, Sue Moroney, for her hard work and her persistence and her patience with this bill, and also on her luck. It's quite unusual for a member to have one bill drawn out of the ballot, like a lucky dip, but it's very unusual to have two. And so here we are, again, 5 bills. Well, this is the second one on the same issue around paid parental leave. And here we are again, voting and debating another bill around paid parental leave, when I'm disappointed because actually we could have passed this bill in 2014, the last time it came up. And actually, the fact that the National Party did not support it then means that thousands and thousands of New Zealand babies and their mums and families have missed out on extended paid parental leave. So this is an opportunity, I think, for National to be on the right side of history. We've seen National do their usual adopt an opposition policy and do it half-heartedly, but by raising paid parental leave last year, first from the 16 weeks to the 18 weeks, but actually 18 weeks is better than 16 weeks, but 26 weeks is better than all of that. As with the last time, Mr. Speaker, this bill received near unanimous support from the public submissions and the wider public. I filled in for my colleague, Mojo Mathers, on the Government Administration Select Committee and was part of the proceedings, and I want to thank both the committee and the chair, the Honourable Ruth Dyson, for having me on the committee. It was very interesting. This bill received 6,755 submissions, which, as others have said, is twice the number that was received on the last paid parental leave bill in Sue Moroney's name. The submissions were actually really well received, and the evidence was of a very high standard, and they were all calling for 6 months or longer. I acknowledge the submissions made by quite a wide variety of groups, from the Council of Trade Unions, from Family First, the University of Auckland, and the New Zealand Police Association, for example. The diversity of groups who support the bill indicates that this is something that lots of families are crying out for. This bill is an example of smart investment in our families that will make a practical difference for many working families. And as I said in my first reading speech, my first reading of this bill, it's actually really crucial that we invest in our young people. It's cost effective. With the benefits of investing in our young people between the ages of 0 to 3 years old, the return is something like between $1.80 and $17 per dollar invested. The investment that we give now gives a return further down the track in savings. We're also supporting this bill, sir, because we know that policies that enable women to participate in the workplace, unsurprisingly, helps address the pay gap between men and women. The reality for many women in New Zealand is that the pay gap is between 11.8% and 14%, and women are still facing barriers in the workplace, not just in the pay gap, but also with leadership in both the public and the private sector. The Ministry of Women's report quite recently said that 43.4% of women in senior positions, there's only 43.4% of women in senior positions at board level in the public sector, and in the private sector it's only around 14%. I think we also need to acknowledge that there's a lot more that we could be doing to support the families and the most vulnerable in our society. Our policy, sir, is for 13 months paid parental leave, and it was nice to hear that side of the House mentioning that this is the recommendation from a 2007 Families Commission report. 13 months would certainly be better for the family, but we also need to look at other things aside from paid parental leave that we could be providing as well. And I want to acknowledge the submissions from the Child Action Poverty Group and the Children's Commissioner, who both said that 30,000 babies, nearly half of all born annually, will not be eligible for the paid parental leave benefit, because that depends on sustained labour force attachment as the criteria for eligibility for the scheme. So that means that some of our most vulnerable babies are still being born in households where they're unable to access any kind of support, and they need our help too. So we could be doing more things like we could strengthen the power of workers in this country to bargain collectively so that there are higher wages, and frequently that leads to higher productivity. We could invest in high quality housing stock so that we don't have babies and families in cold, damp and unhealthy housing. We could invest in a smart green economy with integrated transport, with clean energy and with livable cities. We could be making things better, sir. And for those who say that we can't afford to increase paid parental leave to 26 weeks, which, as others have said, is only $107 million. For those who say we can't afford it, I say to them, that's what the opposition said when we wanted equal pay for women. And that's what slave owners said when we abolished slavery. So I think, sir, the time is right for this government to show their support for families and to approve and vote for this bill.
I call